Hello, everyone. Welcome to Interesting Stories. Let's get started. The tiny bell above the glass door gave a soft jingle as the diner door opened. A gust of cold wind followed two police officers inside heavy boots, stepping in rhythm on the worn black and white checkered floor. The diner fell almost silent, save for the faint clink of a spoon from one corner. There, Ezekiel Barnes, a middle-aged black man, sat alone with a cup of lukewarm coffee. A faded military jacket draped over his shoulders. His left arm resting on the table revealed a blurred tattoo of the American flag. "Looks like we've got ourselves an uninvited guest," said the bald officer Harlan, tilting his head toward his partner. Sitting all alone must be his favorite seat. They chuckled quietly, not loud enough to cause a scene, but enough to make a young waiter behind the counter look down in discomfort. Ezekiel didn't react. He simply lifted his mug, took a slow sip, and placed it back down as if the noise behind him had never existed. An elderly woman at a nearby table pulled her purse closer. The teenager behind the cash register avoided glancing toward the back corner. Harlan stepped closer, blocking the view directly in front of Ezekiel's table. He leaned slightly forward, one hand resting near the belt that held his holstered weapon. Morning, Ezekiel replied, his voice rough but calm. "You been here long?" "About an hour, I guess. This place has a clear policy about occupying a table when all you've ordered is a cold coffee." Ezekiel looked up. His gaze wasn't hard nor frightened, just strangely hollow. "I'm not sleeping here. Just finishing my drink, then I'll go." Harlan glanced under the table, noticing the frayed canvas backpack by Ezekiel's feet. "Where you coming from, Fayetteville?" "But that was a while ago. Got any idea?" A beat of silence. Ezekiel just exhaled softly, eyes still on his half-empty cup. "I used to wear a badge," he said slowly. "But you guys don't care much about badges." A faint swirl of steam rose from someone else's coffee. Ezekiel's cup, however, had long gone cold. He slowly turned the ceramic mug between both hands, still refusing to look up at the officers in front of him. "You used to wear a badge?" asked the younger officer Reed, squinting. "Military. Where's your ID?" Ezekiel gave a dry smirk. "I used to have it all. Military ID, invitations to memorials. Even shook the vice president's hand once. But eventually, I learned something: badges don't get you a bed when you come home." Outside the diner window, a cold wind swept down the street, rustling a few dry leaves. Ezekiel's mind drifted back to the first time he wore that Air Force Special Operations uniform. He was 24. Thick hair, straight back, eyes full of belief. "I was in Kandahar, then Helmand, and then a long stretch where no one was supposed to know where I was." "So why are you here now, looking like a damn hobo?" Harlan cut in, sneering. There was no answer, just Ezekiel quietly staring back at Harlan, asking in return softly, "Have you ever asked why someone who wore a uniform ends up homeless? Or do you just see a dirty problem messing up your space and want it gone?" Reed looked momentarily unsettled. He was younger, unaccustomed to this kind of conversation from someone who didn't look the part. Ezekiel continued, his voice steady, not loud, not bitter. "I came home with metal in my chest and stitches in my skull. I'm not asking anyone to care, but I'd hoped, at the very least, coffee wouldn't require proof of residency." The diner remained quiet. Even the waitress behind the counter had stopped polishing glasses. Harlan crossed his arms, but it was clear he was starting to waver. Ezekiel exhaled and slowly reached into his jacket pocket. He placed a phone on the table gently. "Let's end this part right here, shall we? If you still want to remove me, I only need to call one number." "What social services?" Harlan scoffed. Ezekiel said nothing. He swiped his screen, opening his contacts. Only one name had a gold star beside it: General R.M. Caldwell. Ezekiel Barnes's phone sat in the middle of the table, its screen aglow with a simple contact name: General R.M. Caldwell, Pentagon line. Not a word extra. Reed glanced at it briefly and snorted. "That's a fancy contact name you've got there." Ezekiel didn't smile. He picked up the phone with two fingers, held it in his palm, and looked at Harlan. "I'm giving you one last chance. Take your hand off your weapon. Turn around. Leave this diner." Harlan let out a laugh like he'd just heard the worst joke of his life. Or what you gonna call your little homeless hotline? Ezekiel's tone never changed. Or he replied calmly, I make the call and tomorrow your name shows up in the paper under suspended without pay for misconduct toward protected personnel. This time Reed actually looked rattled. Wait, protected personnel? What is this guy even talking about? Ezekiel didn't answer. He pressed call. The phone rang once. Then a voice answered sharp, clear, and loud enough to send a chill through the whole diner. Barnes, you're still breathing. Ezekiel didn't look away from Harlan. Barely, but I need a favor. Urgent. Right then, the tiny TV mounted above the counter switched channels by itself. A breaking news alert rolled across the screen in bold red. Pentagon confirms internal investigation into unlawful surveillance of former Special Operations personnel. Heads turned. The waitress dropped her towel. The diner had stopped breathing. Suddenly, Harlan's police radio crackled, distorted by static. Then a voice came through crisp and commanding. All units stand down. Do not engage with subject Ezekiel Barnes. I repeat, stand down immediately. This is a federal directive. Reed stood frozen. Harlan turned pale. He looked at Ezekiel for the first time not as a vagrant, but as someone he had just seriously misjudged. Who are you? He stammered. Ezekiel responded with a near whisper. This time I called out of courtesy. Next time, I'll be calling in your obituary. Outside, sirens wailed, not the kind used by local cops. Red and blue lights blinked in the distance, growing brighter, faster, closer. The diner's front windows rattled lightly as a motorcade of black SUVs pulled up. Not local patrol cars, federally plated armored vehicles. Inside, Officer Reed looked like the color had drained from his face. He turned to Harlan, voice shaking. You sure you want to keep going with this? This isn't just a routine ID check anymore. Harlan's jaw was clenched tight, but the hand that had hovered near his weapon had now dropped to his side. Ezekiel remained seated, his gaze steady. His phone, still on speaker, carried the voice of the general across the table, calm and firm. Ezekiel, we received your signal. Rapid response is en route. No one touches you. Understood. Ezekiel gave a slight nod, even though he knew they couldn't see it. Understood. I'm just waiting for you all to restore dignity properly. Outside, the sirens ceased. Doors opened. Boots struck pavement in perfect sync. 3 federal agents in dark suits and clear ID badges entered the diner with purpose. The lead agent pointed directly at the officers. Officer Harlan, Officer Reed, under provisional order from the Department of Justice, you are hereby suspended, effective immediately for misconduct against federally protected personnel. A wave of disbelief swept through the diner. The quiet waitress finally whispered, Who is he? An elderly man in the corner muttered, I've seen that look before. At Arlington, from men who didn't come back the same. Reed raised his hands in quiet surrender. Harlan, stiff as stone, didn't resist as the cuffs clicked around his wrists for the first time in his life, at the exact place he thought he'd always be, in charge. Ezekiel stood brushing the dust off his sleeve. He walked slowly past the 2 bowed officers, no words, no gloating. Then, as if to close the moment, like a final chapter, he leaned slightly toward Harlan's ear and said, My silence once protected this country. Your silence, it only ever protected your cowardice. He didn't look back. The door opened once again. This time sunlight poured in, and it wasn't cold. Midday sunlight spilled across the cracked concrete steps outside the diner. Ezekiel walked out not in a rush, not victorious, just steady. He looked up. The sky was blindingly blue. Behind him, the 2 officers were escorted out the back. Not with sirens, not with bravado, just the sound of dragging footsteps and heads bowed low. A local news reporter arrived, camera in hand, rushing to the scene. Sir, who are you? Can you give us a statement about what just happened? Ezekiel paused for a beat, then spoke without looking into the lens. Who I am doesn't matter. Ask them why a man had to call the Pentagon just to finish his coffee. Silence. The cameraman froze, unsure whether to keep rolling or just lower the device. Ezekiel moved past the growing crowd. On the street corner, a young boy standing beside his mother looked up and asked quietly, "Mom, who is that man?" She followed Ezekiel with her eyes, then answered gently, "He's one of those people you only recognize when it's already too late." Ezekiel stopped briefly beside the SUV. In the dark window, his reflection stared back lean, sun-worn, tired eyes that no longer held rage, only weight. A federal agent opened the door and asked softly, "Sir, would you like to return to headquarters? There is a room ready, quiet, private." Ezekiel shook his head. "I've been to safe places before. Too many still haven't." He turned his gaze back to the diner, now crowded with onlookers, snapping photos, recording video, but no one dared sit in the corner booth where he had been. "Don't clean that chair," he said to the agent beside him, voice more like a message than a command. "Leave the seat marked, so they remember someone once got ID checked at a place they protected with their life." Some stories don't need to be shouted. They only need silence strong enough that no one can look away. If you believe that every person, even the unseen among us, deserves respect, help us spread that truth. Like this story, if you've ever felt unseen, comment if you've witnessed or been part of the silence. Subscribe to Interesting Stories for more moments that seem small, but change the way we see the world. Because sometimes one story told at the right moment is enough to make an entire system stop and listen.